All right. We're on YouTube, and here we go. Hello, and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest, I can hear myself. Hold on one second. Mess up the intro live on YouTube. I've only started doing it live on YouTube off of Facebook, so I'm just going to start it again, even though it's live. Today's guest is an author, an independent researcher who has focused on biochemical and bioelectrical properties of mystical experiences and supernormal abilities. He is the author of 2 books titled Questions for the Lion Tamer 1 and Questions for the Lion Tamer 2. His main interest is spurring modern discussions regarding esoteric subjects and opening the gateway towards spirituality by utilizing data generated by scientific discovery. Welcome to the show, John Chavez.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. It's a blessing to be here. We were introduced by my friend, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, who's another explorer and a researcher and just a fabulous person overall. So it's good that, we connected and we're able to talk about some things that interest us.
Yeah, 100%. That's who connected us, Dr. Ethan. She's incredible. I had such amazing feedback, and everyone just loved her energy and her authenticity. And I took a look she has a podcast too, and I said, hey, who's on your show that you feel should have their message shared and who I should speak to? And you were one of those suggestions. I got to look at some of your work. It's very similar in what I'm researching and exploring. And I'm really excited because you're looking at, biochemical and scientific data and, bringing those things together. And that's something I could definitely always use more information on. So why don't you just give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you've been up to, and what you're doing?
Sure. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. Family kind of raised me Catholic, Christian, that type of stuff. I never really gravitated towards religion or spirituality because, according to your education, even starting from second grade up until high school, none of that stuff was really integrated in a real way. So, I never really had interest in any of these topics that I'm, I guess, delving into now in depth. What happened is that when I was having a lot of health problems in my mid 20s and early 30s. And the only way I could describe it is that I had a spiritual experience in 2013 that really opened my eyes to what the human potential and the possibilities are. And it kind of just led me on my path to really ask these questions as to maybe some of the things that from the past, like some of the things from religious texts like the Bible or even Buddhism were actually true. Things that I always felt that were not true, like hands-on healing, telepathy, things of that nature that would always be presented as supernatural. And we see it in movies and things of that nature, but we never really, there's nowhere that you can go in your regular education from kindergarten to high school to even college that really kind of puts those seeds in your mind to really explore those things in a intellectual way, reading books and things of that nature. So, thank God for the internet. That's all I have to say, because in 2013, without the internet, I would have been so lost. I would have been probably labeled as a completely crazy person. And I felt bad thinking about people that had to go through these spiritual awakenings and spiritual experiences prior to the internet, because it would be almost impossible as to where they should go look for information and try to put the pieces together to where it makes sense, So in terms of my spiritual experience, you want me to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. So basically I was having a lot of health problems, like I mentioned before, and I induced a significant purge in my body, a GI tract purge. And basically what had happened was, at the moment of the purge, what I'm referring to is I induced a lot of bowel movements. And as my bowels were clearing out, it took about 3 or 4 hours. I started to feel like an electric surge from my tailbone up to the top of my head, and even outside. I felt like an electrical buzz that it was undeniable. And I started to feel a different sensation emotionally as well. I started to feel like a deep euphoria during this time. It was almost like a life force started to build up inside me, and something that I hadn't felt for maybe throughout my entire life. And what happened was, let me walk you through this. So after the purge, about it was 90 to 100 bowel movements where I just started to really kind of just release a lot of tension and excess gunk in my gut. And I didn't know anything about the gut brain at that point. So it was all really new to me as to the importance of the gut function and how it might pertain to even some of these mystical experiences and emotions. So as the purge increased and my electrical buzz started to increase, I started to notice different sensations in myself when interacting with the regular world in this just from that first day. So, for example, when I would touch metallic objects, they would start to get hot, like really quick within 3 or 4 seconds. And it was a very strange sensation because it's nothing that I had ever experienced before in my life. Um, when I hopped in the shower, uh, cold water didn't feel cold, which was really strange to me because I had never experienced that before. You know, my nervous system was pretty average at the point. You know, when something was hot, it would feel hot. When something was cold, I would brace it. But when I entered the shower that day, right after the purge, it felt as though I had control over my body temperature. When the cold shower went on, my intent seemed to, I guess, block that cold feeling, and it just led me to feel like, wow, it feels like my intent is having some sort of effect on my perception of reality. Because at that point, I didn't know that I was having a real effect on reality. It was just my perception had been changed. Another thing was when I would go to wash the dishes that day, just with my hand, it was very soft, but it seemed like my intent was the one that was kind of, I guess, cleaning up the plate. It was just a really strange overall sensation. And another thing was when I would be exposed to like electronic objects, they would either break down or I would be really sensitive to them. Like if there was like an electrical wire, I could feel it. I could feel it like disrupting my head. It was kind of like it's kind of hard to describe, but it was almost like a buzzing feeling that I could feel. And at that point, I had this inkling that there was something different in the sense of our bodies are not just flesh, bone, and chemicals, that we actually have an electrical component to us, a magnetic component to us, something that could extend past the body. That was, I felt that because the electrical wires were disrupting me somehow, but obviously, I wasn't physically touching them. So it really kind of led me down the path of trying to understand what else there is out there, because I almost felt like my intention and I guess, my field could expand outside of my body. So another thing that occurred in the couple of days leading after this experience was at night. I don't know, sometimes if you feel like your feet get cold, and I just had a intuition to visualize my right foot getting warm. And when I did that, uh, I felt my right foot get warm within like 2 or 3 seconds. I felt that internally. And what I then did is that I grabbed my foot with my hand, and I felt that it was physically warm. I grabbed the left foot and it was still cold. So I was like, okay, this seems like I can induce some sort of effect based on intent or visualization. I don't know why I had that intuition. I had not read any books in spirituality or anything of that nature. Up until this point, I was very kind of closed off. So then I go ahead and do the same thing with the left foot, and the left foot gets warm in like 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, so visualization, intent can have some sort of effect. This is different. I never felt anything like that before in my life. And, I just kind of led me down the path of exploring more. Next day, I'm sitting in the evening with my girlfriend across from me. We're just kind of listening to soft music and kind of digesting the whole experience. And basically, I had another intuition to go ahead and see if I could connect with her physically, but you know, through the air per se. So I used the same exact visualization intent to see if I could connect the bridge with her. The same visualization that I used to warm my right foot, my left foot. I was like, let me see what happens if I extend that past my physical body and just see if I could connect with her. So I visualized, I don't know, my brain connecting with her brain through like a electrical force. And about 2 seconds into it, I'm getting deep into the visualization. I see her head jolt back like that. And at that point, I knew that I could connect with her physically. I could connect with another human physically, just through visualization and intent. So it wasn't necessarily just a nervous system thing, that you were kind of influencing your nervous system to go ahead and influence your own body. You can do this, through the air. And at that point, I was like, I had another intuition that maybe telepathy was real. So, I do the same thing, visual intent. And I just go ahead and visualize an object over the visualization, and boom, that's the only thing that came to her mind at that point. And we did it like 3 or 4 times in a row. And I was like, okay, at this point, I'm not telling you to pick a number between 1 and 10. I'm just literally visualizing something over that connection that I'm visualizing. And it seemed to work up until the point that we got all excited, and it stopped working for a little bit. But at that point, I knew telepathy was real. I knew that potentially hands-on healing was real, because we were always taught that, there cannot be anything transferred between a person's hand and a person's body without physical touch. But it opened me up to that possibility as well. So I just started to dig into the literature at that point. And, I stumbled upon Dr. Robert Becker. He wrote a great book called The Bioelectric. I don't know if you're aware of it, but he studied the regenerative capabilities of salamanders. And what he did was he observed the fact that there was changes in consciousness while there were changes in the regeneration. And when when he would do his experiments and block the change in consciousness in the brain, the regeneration within the limb would cease to exist. So it just opened up not the possibilities, but just it gave me a framework to know that this stuff is real. It wasn't just happening to me. People have researched this probably since the beginning of mankind. It's kind of been sporadic in terms of what's been known out there in the general public, but these types of abilities are definitely something real. And I just, over time, I kind of built a framework for myself, what worked for me to explain it to others, to have conversations with people and, not scare them off. And, because usually the first thing that, what happens when you talk about stuff like telepathy, then either they try to make fun of you or they try to, things of that nature. There's a lot of jeering going on. So, the way that I premise it is, put a lot of data behind it, talk about it in a pretty rational manner. And, it's been a pretty interesting journey since then. It's been, 5 or 6 years since then. And, I've gotten a lot better in describing these sorts of transpirations and trying to build a bridge between, spirituality and the hard-nosed scientists. I've been involved in a few DMT symposiums. One was in the UK and the other one was in New York. And, a lot of the names like Dennis McKenna and Roland Griffiths and some other fellas that are pretty well known. I think Graham Hancock was at the last one, where we just delve into very interesting discussions as to what we can do to move forward and push this conversation further into the mainstream narrative.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. Sounds like a really intense experience, and I think that it's interesting how when you have an opportunity or some sort of external catalyst, like a lot of people will have an awakening from a trauma or an illness or some sort of shift. And then they're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And you're offered kind of like an inspiration in which you took, you had this like voice and opportunity. You're like, okay, I'm going to start testing this. And then you start taking it out on your own to be like, how far does this go? It's almost like when Spider-Man gets his powers or Daredevil, it's just like, how far does this go? You know what I mean? And like, what am I capable of? And I think that it's a really important question for people to ask, because, if you don't believe it's possible, it's definitely not going to happen. But also if we can bridge it with hardcore science and proof, that is obviously helpful, because this stuff is really out there. I've had similar experiences where I could feel things on my head, sometimes meditating at the third eye, feeling these different things, and having just, odd experiences. And, if you look up the work, I'm sure you're familiar, Dr. Joe Dispenza, when he had, the reason why he does all this work on meditation and healing yourself is because he got hit when he was on his bike, and he had to do this major surgery, and he said no, and he healed himself through visualizing his spine coming back together, and it actually worked. And he said, if this works, I'm going to spend the rest of my life figuring out why it worked. And I think it's fascinating that you talk about the electrical energy, because I'm friends and study with Native American elder and a mathematician and a scientist, David Lombard Senepas, and he says what he was taught that this universe only has one energy, and it's electricity. I am also friends with Robert Grant, who is brilliant. His company's on the New York Stock Exchange, and he's made all these mathematical discoveries. And I did his course, Etymology and Number, and he said the same thing. We only have one energy here, and it's electricity. And electricity seems to go hand in hand with science. So I want to kind of throw it back to you. You can add on to anything that I just said there, but I'm curious where some of your research has led to you. Like if you want to talk about some of the work in your book, or DMT is a big topic now, we could go that way. But what way do you think we can move this conversation? And the one thing that I want to ask as well is like in a practical form of developing that either DMT experience or spiritual experience, or increasing the human capacity to have supernormal, supernatural experiences.
Yes, so man, that's a lot of information. One of the interesting things is, our interpretation of data is based on the equipment used to generate it, right? So, now a lot of neuroscientists have been using the EEG for about almost 100 years now. Hans Berger, he was a designer of it to specifically study telepathy in the 1920s, because he had an experience and he felt that, much like mine, it was undeniable. So he went out of his way to develop equipment that's still utilized to this day, but most neuroscientists don't know that. The EEG, with all the channels, that's used to read microelectric currents in the brain that coincides with changes in your experience, changes in your perception. Dr. Robert Becker, the guy that I'm citing in terms of the body electric, he used a different measurement device. He used a direct current measurement. So instead of all the channels, it was much more simple. It was a plus and a minus. So it was a plus at the forehead and a minus at the back. And basically it would flip when we would go to sleep, and it would be a minus at the front or plus in the back, one or the other. But basically what I'm saying is that with the EEG, you talk a lot about brainwaves, right? And I'm sure you've heard that conversation when it's delta sleep, theta is like hypnosis, meditation, alpha is a flow state, beta is a stress state or a focus state, and gamma is like a hyper-focused, hyper-conscious state. So it's just a terminology is different based on the equipment utilized. The thing with Becker is that he would just measure the direction of the electric current and the coinciding with changes in consciousness. And like much of the focuses in his work was about electricity, but at the same time, through my own work, I've kind of married a lot of the EEG data with his data in terms of understanding what was going on electrically, directionally, coinciding with the current status of EEG information in regards to altered states, as well as the data out there regarding the biochemical fluctuations in these altered states, which is there's an immense fluctuation. So just for example, when we take our circadian rhythm, 24 hours, right? It's day, night, light, dark. There's a big cascade effect in a lot of our biochemical changes. Melatonin rises like crazy during the night. Serotonin rises like crazy during the daytime. But at some point, it seems as though we have an even more interesting system that comes along online when we talk about things like dream sleep, lucid dreaming, hypnagogia, even hypnosis or meditation to a certain extent, where people are having visionary experiences. And I think the most logical place to start is to start with our endogenous hallucinatory compounds, which is, our DMTs, our NN-DMT, the 5-MeO-DMT, and the BUFO. Those are the three endogenous DMTs in the body that are considered hallucinogens. So we have to start there when we're talking about the dream state, from my perspective. Another thing that I guess I've shed light on throughout the work is I call it the endowaska system, because we all know about ayahuasca. It's the DMT plus the MAOI that allows the brew to be orally active. But in the body, we actually have tons of monoamine oxidase inhibitors as well. And that's something that's not really discussed in the DMT circles and the spiritual circles. A lot of it's focused on just the DMT, but we actually have the entire setup like ayahuasca. We have tribulin, pinolene, and a few others that you can look up in the book or on the site. Basically, we're built for this. We're built to have spiritual psychedelic experiences from a biochemical perspective. From an electrical perspective, it seems as though what happens during these states is that instead of the current just running linearly one way or linearly the other way, it starts to oscillate in a very rapid manner. And what I believe is occurring is that once our oscillations in the brain increase at a rapid manner, our consciousness can actually expand outside of the body. So it's just basic physics, right? You have an electric current, it goes back and forth, and based on the speed of that current and the strength of that current, the field will expand accordingly. And we have this classic perception that our perception is based on what we ingest through the eyes, but obviously we can have experiences with the eyes closed. The dream is a perfect example of that. We're having experiences without the eyes open. So that means there's the potential that we can actually perceive without the eyes at all, which is very strange. I know it's extremely strange. It's even strange to me. But that when we're talking about merging the conversations of biochemical upregulation and the changes in our electrical capacity during these states, that's what I'm looking at. So, my perspective of science is that it's a narrative. So whatever's measurable can be, I guess, presented in a scientific manner, whatever your agenda is. And the way that I'm presenting it is that these things are measurable, they're occurring, so they're undeniables, right? So brain activity from an EEG perspective or a direct current measurement, when you're measuring the circadian rhythm or during meditation or hypnosis, there's changes that are undeniable. From a biochemical perspective, there's changes that are undeniable as well. We have these chemicals within us. Measuring them and to measure the effect is a little bit difficult in vivo in a live human, because we'd have to take samples of a live brain, which is not very ethical at this point. So we'd have to find a different method of doing that. But the point being is that if we start at the conversations of what's measurable, what's undeniable, then from my perspective, it seems as though we open the gateway to have conversations with a much broader audience, ones that would normally be skeptical of these things. But once you start at the conversation of like the chemical level, because we're in such a chemical society these days, that they become open to it. And you can start to merge the conversation when you talk about, all right, we have these chemicals, and over time, these things get upregulated and we have these experiences, and it's happening synchronously with these changes in electricity. So that's what I see sometimes, is that when people are studying something, it's all like all chemical or all electric. And I feel like there needs to be kind of a merging of those conversations, because when we're talking about abilities that extend past the body, we have to have a layer to discuss that, right? We can't just be talking about chemical layers, talking about DMT. There needs to be a layer of the body that can extend past it, so we can stomach the fact that these telepathic, hands-on healing stuff can actually occur. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, there's a ton of great information in there. And I think it's an important point that you're making, is bridging the, the biochemical and the electrical, because they go hand in hand. And, if you can, it's like positive, negative, if you're trying to figure out electricity. If you have just one or you study just the other, you kind of need to put them together. And then you also need to know what the ground is. So it's kind of, in a way, a missing element. It's incomplete without the other. And one affects the other. So I definitely hear what you're saying. And I think that you made an excellent point when you talked about having it in the body. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Ayahuasca has become very well known, and DMT has become very well known, and psychedelics are having a huge push towards positivity and, how people should use those things. And, I was actually a really big advocate for ayahuasca and DMT and all those things for a long time. Now I'm not as sure, only because the one person I really respect the Native American elder, I asked him, I was like, you know, did you guys use that kind of stuff? He's like, everything that has, your body has. And I know that that's true. He's like, we never use that stuff. He's like, we don't affect our consciousness, because if we want to figure out what reality is, that's going to change your reality. So it's going to be harder for you. But if you can really connect to what reality is and understand your body, then you can produce this from within yourself. But I think there was another point that he had made, was basically saying that this reality being present, you know, in nature, in the trees and amongst people, really present and fully conscious, is the state that you want. You don't want to be all bugged out, you know what I mean? DMT flow and trying to like go through traffic. Is like, this experience is maxed out enough. However, you know, in my own research and my understanding, like if you want to do psychedelics, I know a lot of people have had great benefit from that. And, you know, the DMT experience, you know, being in the pineal gland, and you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs and you look at the Bible and you read it in a certain way, it's anatomy, you know, the serpent and all that stuff. It's going up the central nervous system to turn on the pineal gland. And you look at, you know, all these YouTube videos and how to turn it on and things like that. But I think the idea is that we desire, I think I do, and I think many others, to have a mystical experience. We want that because we want to know that sometimes this life is dark and it's hard and it's you go through depression, and you know, you just want to know that there's something more, and a mystical experience would show you that. And I think that we can generate that within the body. So my question to you would be, with your research, what is some of the I don't know, undeniable knowledge that a proof that you talk about, of how the body produces it? And also, what's your take on producing that within the body? Because I know there's a lot of information out there on like producing DMT. And do you think that there's value in even that pursuit?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, it seems like let me change that. There's two pathways, and this seems to be very common within the body. There's a relaxative pathway, and then there's a trauma pathway. Like they've done studies in rats, and they've shown that if they stress the rats to a very high degree, DMT rises. That's not necessarily the way that you'd want to do it, right? You wouldn't want to traumatize yourself to a high degree just to get, you know, your DMT levels up. And then the relaxative way is the way that you'd want to go. That's meditation, hypnosis, sensory deprivation tanks, extended darkness, maybe extended breath work, listening to trance-like music. There's so many different ways. Fasting is another excellent way. I think that there are very safe ways that you can go about attempting to access the endowaska system. I think that it's good to start off gently. There's no reason to go ahead and rush into it and go so hardcore into it. That's kind of one of the things that I do, is that I walk people through the process of kind of not inducing the same experience that I have, but some similarities in terms of getting the gut brain right, getting your health right, just better practices. And, you know, one of the interesting things that I found is that, you know, in Rick Strassman's study, there was 4 levels of DMT that he studied. It was 0.05 milligrams per kilogram, 0.1, I think 0.2 and 0.4. And in the 2 lowest levels, they were sub-psychedelic. That means there was no visionary experiences from the DMT, even though it's still a hallucinogen administered. But the effect on the lowest level of administration, the 0.05, it was described as being euphoric. One of the people in the trials had done heroin before and described a distinct similarity between DMT and heroin, the effects of it. No psychedelic experiences, but just a feeling of emotion, of being coddled, you know, just feeling great. And that led me down the path of understanding that, you know, DMT is not just, oh, we got to have a full-blown mystical visionary experience, because I didn't have that. I didn't have a visionary experience. I had a deep euphoria for like 6-7 weeks of being connected to something greater than myself. And that's what I kind of help people go through these days is, you know, if you're feeling down or you're not feeling right, then we kind of walk you through how to refurbish your body, kind of build up these, you know, the endowaska system, and you start to feel. You have to start with feeling good first, right? You have to start with euphoria first. You have to start with the low levels of DMT building up into something, it could be a massive spiritual experience, or it could just be euphoria for 20 years, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So that's what kind of led me to understand that the whole DMT conversation doesn't have to be so one-sided, right? It doesn't have to be aliens or nothing. It can be a lot more subtle. And that's where I'm at these days, where I feel like a combination of GI refurbishing, maybe a little purging in a gentle manner, maybe using vitamin C, doing some fasting, maybe getting some good sun rays, and just drinking really good clean water, and even juice fasting if you need to, can really do a big difference on somebody, how they feel in just a couple days. And I think that, if they really want to get deeper into, I guess, building up their own endowaska system, they can go deeper into the fasting and the darkness and the meditations, the chanting, the music, things of that nature. And overall, I just feel like there's mainly like 99.9% positive effects from that. So I think I agree with your Native American elder who describes this as being inherent to us, and something that I'm not against psychedelics at all. I'm not a big proponent of it personally. I think there's a time and place for everything, but they're illegal, so you can still get in trouble for it. And we have the system with access. We have easy access to it. So I think it's time that humanity starts to become a little bit more aware of that fact that we have complete access to this. It's undeniable. So let's just build protocols like Joe Dispenza has done to go ahead and dip into that goodness.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you said there. And you brought up a lot of great points. What I wanted to ask for practicality, and you touched on it, could you offer a simple protocol for, let's say a beginner version for increasing the endowaska system, and then a maxed out protocol? So like 1 to 3 is like, here's your baby version. And it's like, all right, you want to get some, here's an advanced version.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the baby version would probably be I start people off with buffered vitamin C, about a tablespoon of that, and maybe 30 ounces of water. You do this first thing in the morning. Let's say the baby version is going to assume that you have 3 days free. Okay. It's not going to assume that you still going to have to maybe operate. I mean, you might have to go to work and all that, but I'm going to just give you the gist. So first day, you're going to go ahead and clean out your GI tract, because that's super important. I think we produce a lot of our DMT in our GI tract, to be quite honest. From my research, it seems as though there was a study that showed there was a lot of DMT in our stools, actually. And the researchers hypothesized that they think that glands throughout the entire colon and the entire GI tract are what's producing it. So you got to go ahead and clean out the GI tract. If you want to, you can go ahead and maybe do like a 2 or 3 day juice fast, where you're drinking like celery juice or carrot juice or a combination of green juice for 2 to 3 days. And what you want to do is do at least 20 minutes of, something akin to the Wim Hof method, where you're doing deep rhythmic breathing through the nose and out through the mouth. You want to do that at least twice a day, one in the morning and one at night. And if you could do it longer at night, that would be greater. And that's basically what you want to do. And usually by the third day, people are feeling just completely different, right? We don't know how much our emotions are affected by our GI tract. And like, if we're gunked up and we have a bad diet, eating a lot of McDonald's and stuff like that, we don't want to be sitting in that. We need to clear that out. So a combination of that purging, juicing, and breath work will get you to, like, I would say out of stage 1 through 5, you're going to be at stage probably like 2. You're going to be feeling a lot better emotionally, and you might have different sort of dream experiences from what I've heard from, working with people. And it's just an overall sort of sense of connectivity with oneself. It's very different. It could be done in 3 days. The more extensive program, which I've worked with people on this before, is, it's just more extended fasting. You could do a dark, extended darkness. You could be listening to like binaural beats or different sort of audio tracks. To basically, what you want to do is stay in a very sedated state, very tranquil state. That's the key, is that when it comes to the mechanics of accessing these mystical experiences, it comes from going into like a very deep, a deep slow wave state, like a theta or a delta. And what's going to happen is, once you go ahead and access these states for prolonged periods, you're going to see a high spike in gamma waves. This is what Joe Dispenza talks a lot about. it's funny because a lot of the work that I've done, I came up to all these conclusions before I read Joe's stuff. That's why I was like, oh man, Joe's the man. We haven't even touched base, and like he's been doing the research in real time, and that's a whole different topic, but I'm really impressed by his work. But anyways, you want to access these states by basically riding that theta gamma coupling. So it's a slow wave, fast wave coupling. And it goes back to the oscillatory activity using different measurements. But basically what you want is prolonged sedation with prolonged breath work. You know, I'm talking about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour of breath work, just in through the nose, out through the mouth. If you want to look up the basics for the Wim Hof method, you can do that as well. And what you want to do is at night, once you're getting to the end of your breath work, whether it's 30 minutes or 40 minutes, you really want to go ahead and try to move that cerebral spinal fluid from the lower lumbar up throughout the spinal canal, up into the brain. There's different techniques out there. Joe Dispenza talks about one. Wim Hof method talks about one, where basically you're utilizing your muscles around your spinal cord, starting at your tailbone, and you're squeezing up. And basically, you know, you're just creating sort of the tension to rise more cerebral spinal fluid up. And, you know, we believe that it's not just DMT that's being produced in the brain. There's probably hundreds or thousands of other chemicals that are being upregulated during these moments, but that will get you to the point of, you know, having a mystical experience, whether it's just pure euphoria, pure transcendental state where you feel like, you know, you connected with everyone around you. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be full-blown aliens. So, you know, I'm just prepping people for what to experience. And some people do experience, you know, very complicated situations. So that's just a general gist of it. But when you're talking about full-blown, get after it experience, you're talking about, 7 to 10 days of, you know, water fasting and a lot of darkness and a lot of breath work. You know, that's just my perspective.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's really practical and straightforward. I want to just touch on something really quick. Did you say vitamin C? That's what you take, or something else?
Yeah, I recommend people using a buffered vitamin C for their purges, because it's kind of easy to sip on, and you know, you can't overdose on vitamin C, so it's pretty safe. And that's why I encourage people to go ahead and clean out their GI tract for the first day just using vitamin C.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you said buffer vitamin C.
Yeah, buffered vitamin C. It's not too acidic. I guess it comes with magnesium and maybe a little bicarbonate to go ahead and so people don't have super sour stomachs from it.
Got it. Yeah. You know, what you're talking about, I'm familiar with. You know, the gut brain is pretty common if you start looking at it. And I think people want a different state of consciousness. We talk a lot about higher states of consciousness, talk about awakening, talk about human optimization, talk about manifestation and law of attraction, all that kind of good stuff. It's hard to think about those things and experience them directly without breaking your pattern. And people are kind of stuck in a habitual pattern. And one of the things that I use when I coach people, even it doesn't matter, it'd be like a CEO entrepreneur that's just grinding, or like an everyday Joe, I'm like, just do a 2-day fast. And what that does is it pattern interrupts everything. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like the quickest way to kind of like reset. And then it also creates this identity, because you're always thinking about food. And so then you're now separating this voice of like this addictive body voice. And you're like, okay, you know, the body keeps wanting this, but I can actually override that. So you're starting to make these distinctions that are important. And I think the main thing is that what you're sharing right now is not complicated. It's a protocol that is just not common. And so if you could even try the baby version, doing the breath work, you're probably going to have, like you said, it'll be not even subtle. I think it'll be, you know, it's not going to be full-blown aliens, but it's going to be enough energy in a direction. You're like, whoa, what an interesting feeling. What an interesting state of mind that I now have, because I broke that pattern. I was going to ask, just out of curiosity, because you have these really great protocols. I know the Wim Hof method is really popular. I've gone down the breath rabbit hole. You know, I'm like, what is the best breath pattern, and trying all these different things. Do you have a few other than the Wim Hof that you like for, like, I know the Dr. Joe method for pulling up the cerebral spinal, but I'm all about protocols and methods. And I'm just curious if you have like a top 1 or 2 breath and a top 1 or 2 for bringing the spinal fluid up.
I love to simplify things as much as possible, man. So, the main thing is just breathe in deep through the nose and out through the mouth. And, I don't think that you should necessarily do like hard breath work where it's like, like you're doing it so strenuously all the time. I feel like it's good to maybe rev it up at the beginning for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then after that, then you can kind of go to a very slow, easy breath into the nose, out through the mouth. But the main thing you want to do is just stay in that very sedated state, because that's where everything comes from. I have a belief, and it hasn't been proven yet, that there is a load and an activation phase for endogenous DMT in the body. And I feel the load phase coincides with sedation, like a slow wave, like a theta and a delta. It loads into the receptors. And I feel like the activation phase is during the gamma. And, like, thank God for Joe Dispenza, because he talks about that, or else, like, I would be one of the only weirdos talking about that stuff. Because, like, basically my entire book is about the gamma frequency, and that up until the 90s, before digital equipment became very common, you had difficulty measuring the gamma wave during EEG studies. So basically it was just limited to beta. So anything that we could, I guess, pinpoint as coinciding with something like super conscious was kind of immeasurable. So what happened is, once the gamma became measurable, then people started to see that, at least from my own research, that there's a lot of studies that show that all these states, meditation, hypnosis, REM sleep, lucid dream sleep, all these correlate with the gamma state. So, that's why I feel I have the hypothesis that we have a load phase and an activation phase, and we need to learn about the mechanics of them to access them. But yeah, in terms of the breath work, I haven't explored a lot of them, because ultimately, to me, it's, come on, it's just you're breathing in through the nose and you're changing cerebral spinal fluid production, and you're getting oxygen, and you're changing a lot of things. And it's not that each breath it doesn't have something special to them, but to me, into the nose, out to the mouth, 10 to 15 minutes of intense breath work, like the Wim Hof method. And then after that, you can kind of just really do nice and slow. And, but it just needs to be for a prolonged period of time.
Got it. Cool. I appreciate that. And so on that note, what I'm curious about too, because you've looked at this in a lot of different ways. I've looked at a lot of technologies for a while, and I'm just curious what you've explored for technologies that you think are helpful. So binaural beats, one is common. I was down in Estonia with the Sync Tuition company, really cool, binaural beats, and the science behind that stuff is really incredible. I've been exploring binaural beats for a long time. There's the Muse meditation headband, creating like helping you meditate, things like that, like in apps, technology like Headspace. If you don't know how to meditate, it just kind of makes it a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. So what technologies are you aware of, or even practices? One of the main practices that I've been recommending lately is that, well, I've always been a big martial artist and big on, the body understanding. But if you don't know how to meditate, go for a bloody jog. Just go for a jog. You're going to watch your thoughts, you know what I mean? But you're using your body, you don't have to think. You can be all crazy. But if you jog every day for a week and you haven't jogged in years, that will be your meditation. Your body will start producing all those hormones and the biology necessary to start figuring out your crazy mind at that moment, So just curious if you have some like technologies and experiences that you'd recommend, and even like cold rooms or float tanks or anything in that realm, and like also just a personal practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've tried a lot of different things. I like hot and cold therapy a lot. I feel like, if I'm doing a retreat with somebody and I really need to kind of break them down mentally, then that's kind of what I do. Not necessarily in a torture sense, but put their body in a very extreme states that they're normally not comfortable with, or they don't do normally. And it just automatically sedates them. I like keeping people in hypnotic states, because once people stay in hypnotic states, that's just the healing state naturally. We have better autonomic nervous system control and things of that nature. In terms of the equipment, I have an Ajna light at home. I met Guy Harriman, the founder of Ajna Light, in 2016, I believe, in the UK. And we were talking a lot about his technology, and I've had some pretty interesting experiences with the Light. I've had
Can
the
you
Muse. Excuse
can you
me.
can you spell it? What do you? I'm trying to.
AJNA. Yeah, Algena. Yeah, Dennis McKenna talked about it on the Joe Rogan podcast a few years back, and I think Dennis is a big pusher that, in talking with him, he feels like if you're in the right state of mind, that you could definitely have some interesting experience from Ajna Light. There's also other light devices like Lucia Light and I forget the other one, but yeah, I have a Muse device at home, and I think it can be a really good training wheels for somebody who is not used to meditating at all and not really used to understanding what an altered state feels like. Because from what it seems as though people are either very alert and focused and kind of stressed, or they're asleep. What I see a lot of people is that if you don't meditate or you're not used to hypnosis, as soon as we kind of get you into that relaxed state where you're awake but you're not super stressed, and a lot of people fall asleep. So that's why I think things like the Muse are great, because somebody can kind of understand what it feels like to be awake, but to be relaxed, but to be like a human, right? Like you're not this manic stressed person. Like you can actually function and be okay, just be relaxed but awake. Let me see other equipment. Well, so I've done sensory deprivation tanks a few times. I think those are pretty interesting experiences to quiet the mind. One of the interesting things that when you mentioned the jogging, I feel like, just jogging or things of that nature, kind of one of the big proponents of the benefits is just based on that. It basically forces you to kind of get into a rhythmic breathing pattern, and also with the muscle movement, you kind of induce a lot of carbon dioxide in the blood, which it increases your cerebral blood flow. So there's a lot of benefits to jogging that I think that people aren't really aware of when it comes to even spiritual practices. But that's something that I feel like maybe I'm going to start to integrate when I do like little courses with people, because I think that there's more benefits than we're aware of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that those are all really quality suggestions. And when you were saying them, what I think is important is that if you're a person thinking about like these technologies or states of mind or things like that, what these technologies allow you to do is experience something that is not your everyday consciousness. And I have been referring it to uh, like I've been calling this state of consciousness recently taskless consciousness. We wake up and we got to do tasks. And also what the underlying belief and fear in that consciousness is it's survival, because usually you wake up, you grab your coffee or whatever, and you're going to work or you're doing something to perform a task. And if that task is not done on time or right or whatever, you might lose your job or whatever. Then that means you lose your home and you can't go eat a sandwich. So there's like all this underlying survival mechanism to that. And that is your daily default consciousness. And so if you can just see this from an explorer's point of view of like, you know what, I'm going to go try out a float tank 2 or 3 times just to see what that's like. It's going to be a different experience. It breaks, we're talking about hypnosis. One of the powerful tools in hypnosis is a pattern interrupt. You're basically on a treadmill in your mind, and we need to interrupt that pattern. And that's what happens to our neurology and our psychology. It's that we are creatures of habit, and we like comfort, and we also are afraid of things, So when we have security, what happens is we start running our daily patterns, and we lay train tracks. They're not very adaptable. And then every day we run that pattern, the deeper and deeper the train tracks go, or if it's like the line, like that line would go all the way up. So you're never getting off that train track. And that's how your neurology works. And so if you can pattern interrupt by jogging, by maybe trying a light therapy, by going to a Wim Hof class, by just doing something out of the order, go do a dance class for no reason, go do an art class, just do anything to experience a different reality than what you're getting home, doing Netflix, doing whatever. Because I think it needs to be experiential, and that really can have a powerful shift to start then experiencing other states of consciousness, feeling the relaxed space. Because you said something that I thought was so profound in the sense that it was just going and feeling relaxed. It's like, oh, you can take a few deep breaths and you can feel relaxed. Most people go about the day and they do not feel relaxed. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, man, these tracks that you're laying, they're neural pathways. And the one thing that I really stuck out to me in my, I guess, spiritual awakening experience is that our brains aren't necessarily our own. I mean, our thoughts aren't necessarily our own. They're kind of based on our experiences and what we continue to think over and over and over. And it seems as though, like you said, if you break certain patterns, there's a thing in the brain called the default mode network. And a lot of that is, based on our experiences. And what's interesting is that a lot of these altered states, you're talking about sleep and hypnosis and meditation and even psychedelics, they notice that the default mode network quiets a lot. So it's almost like your brain is building new tracks, like just a new potential. And that's really what a lot of these endowaska techniques are all about, is building new tracks. One of my passions when it comes to this is health. So, in my research, a lot of disease seems to be based on autonomic nervous system malfunction. So autonomic nervous system is considered the part of the nervous system that we can't normally influence. The interesting thing is that through the research, a lot of these same states, hypnosis, meditation, you actually have control of your autonomic nervous system in a manner that you don't during your normal waking consciousness. So, there's two things in terms of accessing the endowaska system. It's one of them is to go ahead and try to induce a mystical experience. Another one is to just rewire your brain so you can rewire your body so you can heal yourself. So, the healing has to take place on an emotional level, and the emotional level coincides with the brain. So it's all about changing these pathways, changing these tracks. And you could do that with extended breath work. You can do that even with psychedelics. You can do that with extended sensory deprivation, which they've seen has great effects for PTSD, people with PTSD. So it's just, there's so many layers to this discussion. It can go on and on. I feel like, but for me, one of the primary reasons for exploring it is not just supernormal abilities like telepathy or telekinesis or something even more far-fetched, but it's also just health related. And how do we get our emotions right? How do we get our head straight? How do we heal diseases that are supposed to be unhealable, using mechanisms that are available to us in a pretty easy manner?
Yeah, man, I totally agree with that. And I think that your comment was really on point, because if you look at it statistically, we're a very unhealthy society. We're a very stressed out society, and we're a very fear-based society. And if we are connected to our own power, to our health, to our vitality, to our energy, and to courage rather than fear or love or inspiration, we're going to be vibrating at a much higher level. And if you think about it in brainwave states, I think it goes kind of opposite, because the slower the brainwave, the more relaxed you are, right? And the faster. But then gamma wave is really fast.
There's a coupling that takes place. That's the most interesting thing to me, is that the gamma rides the slow. That's what we see. That's just what's been a consistent thing. So it's not one or the other, right? We got to be flexible. We just look at the data and we try to present a narrative, man. And that's really what we're looking to do. And I just feel like we're at the cusp of it right now. I think that Joe Dispenza is like leading the charge. Wim Hof is leading the charge. Guys like you with podcasts like this are doing a great service to humanity, spreading these messages. So I feel like going forward, in order to really break into the mainstream, I guess that's why I use the DMT conversation so much when talking about these sorts of things. While some people might not understand that it makes sense because DMT is supposed to be about completely mystical experiences, I think that just based on our studies on neuroplasticity, on people that have done ayahuasca that have had miraculous healings, I think those things are super interesting because they're presented in a functional manner. And we all know somebody who's ill. We don't know, not everybody out there knows somebody who wants to have a full-blown psychedelic experience, but I think healing is a must. So I think that that's going to be one of the key catalysts towards pushing the functionality of the ayahuasca conversation in the future.
Yeah, man. And again, you touched on a lot of really great points. I think that it's going to be great when it's mainstream, when we have this basic understanding of our bodies and health. And I've heard it put before and I really like it. The idea that we are in the upside down. And, you know, when I was going through high school, I just knew that so much was nonsense. I was like, I'm getting taught nonsense. The news is nonsense. Something is wrong here. Something is the adults are frigging up. You know what I mean? And then I go through a few years of research and then, you know, conspiracy stuff here and there. And like, you know, people are arguing over who's president now. It's like Trump and people hate Trump. And I was like, bro, Best Buy, Future Shop, you know, McDonald's, Burger King. The power has to be within the people on that scale. And that's like just the world is chaos. But you look at people, they're out of shape, stressed out, like that kind of thing. We don't have the basic knowledge. We have more access to information, ease and comfort than ever before. I saw something once as like, we have more luxury than like the King of England, like 100 years ago or something like that. Right. Yeah. And we're friggin' miserable. We're stressed out. We don't feel good enough. We're not worthy because we're not the skinny model on TV and we're not driving in the Ferrari and then we sell our health so we can just go to a job every day. Why the heck do we need to do that? What the hell is happening here? And so getting to that baseline understanding of health and empowerment, so then we can build our reality from a coherent and balanced state of mind. And then the fascinating idea is, what then? What from that springboard of understanding ourselves, consciousness, and spirituality is possible? And there are people like Wim Hof doing things like that's impossible. Well, I just did 40 things that you, doctor, scientists told me are impossible. How about no, I don't believe you. And what I think is opening up is when I was down in Guatemala for the Mayan fire ceremony with some Mayan elders and a few other elders of different lineages, the Mayans said that they believed humans had 20 senses. And I feel like what's happening now is once we get our basic health back, it's like I usually use goldfish, or we're dolphins thinking we're goldfish because they got sonar and we're understanding how the sonar is our telepathy, right? It's like, oh, bro, we do have sonar. You just don't know how to use it. And you got to stop being a goldfish first to realize you can send that signal. Then guess what else you can do? You can literally jump out of your dimension. Right? Goldfish can't do that. You know, it's like, where does it end? And then you cooperate with the other dolphins and life is better. You know what I mean? You work as a team. And so, you know, I like to, on my Instagram stuff, I'll do hashtag Team Earth or hashtag don't be a dickhead. Be nice to people. You know, on the electrical note, David is a scientist and his elders, what he was taught, he's a biologist, scientist, mathematician. He's like, I was taught there's one energy here. And he's like, I always ask him a ton of different questions. And so one day I'm like, how do we like get the higher consciousness and like expand it? He goes, you know, you guys, and he's like, you white folk, you essentially, he's like, you're always talking about the higher consciousness and DMT and all that kind of stuff. He's just like, the closest thing you're ever going to get to that is 3 kind acts a day, going out of your way and not telling anyone. Then he proceeded to tell me for about an hour, of which very little I understood, with notes and other stuff and me Googling crap, electrical engineering and how you need to create an action to create a charge. And the way that you're in a kind of like a spiritual dimension. So when you go and you do the action, there is a charge that gets emitted, just like if you're with your socks and you shuffle your feet along and then you poke your brother or sister and they give them a shock. So the action of kindness is what creates the charge, and it's stored in your DNA, which has antenna that receive a signal. And so when you're doing these 3 kind acts each day, you're actually creating electrical charges through interaction with your environment. Also why nature is so important, because the trees create electromagnetic fields. The water creates electromagnetic, fields and all that kind of good biochemical stuff that I don't understand. When you scientists did, maybe you could tell me. But I thought that was very fascinating because he's like, the reason why, if you hold that energy, the electricity has to start changing your DNA, because people are talking about DNA upgrades and things like that. He's like, that's actually what would happen. And he's like, but it just gives you more awareness, more consciousness, to then have like a little bit more foresight. Like if you only receive reality and you can see like 1 foot in front of your mind, and that's kind of everybody's default. They can see the next task. And then as they're doing the next task, they're thinking about all these other tasks. So their window is super muddy. You know, it's not actually clear. It's not actually focused, right? You start to do these things, you get a little bit more focus, a little bit more clarity. And then also you see 4 feet out, 10 feet out, 20 feet out. Then boop, in that 20 feet, then something else comes into your awareness as a possibility, as a perspective, and then a new action that can bring you a new level of life or consciousness. Did that make sense? Can you?
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, man. Just based on the intent, I feel like we don't understand intent. There's so much information in regards to visualization and things of that nature, and that's basically intent. You're hallucinating what you want, right? That's what visualization are. When you have these top tier Olympic athletes doing visualizations, they do that for a reason, because it's based on intent, and they're kind of manifesting their future, right? They're not only training their body, but they're training something else, a different layer, something that you just described, that science isn't there yet. At least the big mainstream science isn't there yet in terms of understanding. But yeah, definitely. And I think that doing 3 things a day without anybody knowing that's a great thing that I'm going to add to my protocol now. So it just makes so much sense, because we have the gut brain, we have the brain, and we have neurons in our heart too. And I think that there is, while I'm not trying to make it sound more than it is, I definitely had an experience. Part of my experience was a different feeling in my heart. There was a warmth in it. It felt like I was accessing something that had been closed for a while. I was always like a technical thinker, and somehow a different part of me opened up, and I had a physical sensation that coincided with that, and it wasn't heartburn. So yeah, it was. I feel like there's something there. I can't put it in scientific terms, but yeah, to do something nice for somebody without wanting anything back will open up a part of you to the universe that I think that most of us might not be accessing all the time, and that's where the magic comes from.
Yeah, man. And I really like the addition that you said about opening up that little piece in your heart, because I think that on the planet right now, we've got a system in place that really disempowers and marginalizes the importance and power of following your heart. I feel like our inspiration, to be inspired is to be in spirit. And that's that inner voice that's talking to you all the time. And we are conditioned to shut that voice up. That's not, you're out there thinking, you're not logical. But when you follow that voice first, you put the heart first, the inspiration first, and then you figure it out with the noodle, with the technical, right? Because you could work 40 hours a week at McDonald's, but no, inspired, you want to be a dancer. Dance on the weekends, dance after work. We also are conditioned, and I want to make this very clear, and I'm going to make it more clear in the podcast. Stop looking for the easy pill. Stop looking for the DMT, smoke the DMT. You don't have the answers. I met so many people that have done ayahuasca and DMT and all that stuff, and they're no further ahead than they were. They did get a glimpse, and it was impactful, but it does not the slow way. You go to a Shaolin master, you go to these people that I really respect on the planet having real superhuman abilities. It's through dedication of following that inner voice and proper training, simple things. It's not this like, oh, I just did this and all of a sudden it was easy. So I think that's a part of the process, to accept that, to, get really clear on, what is that inspired voice? Don't be afraid of hard work and moving towards it, right? Limiting all of the nonsense, that distraction, Netflix, social media, all that crap, that's what's keeping you away from moving towards that. You're like, man, I really wish I could start an online business, but I don't have enough time. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. One thing I'd like to say in regards to that, at least from my experience, was that you know, in order to find what we really want in our life, sometimes it helps to get really healthy, right? Because we might think that we want something, like maybe we might even think that it comes from our heart, but if we really put in the work to really get healthy and all that, our wants change. And at that point, that becomes the point where you should really tap in and follow whatever your heart. And if your heart says you're great as you are, then that's great, right? But at some point, maybe your desires change based on your health. I know that's what happened to me. So I feel like absolutely, like we should follow our heart, but at the same time, we should also be aware that sometimes, our pre-programmed conditions in this society give us false notions of what really is in our heart and what isn't in our heart. And I feel like optimizing our health might allow us to tap into deeper truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I'm really glad you added that because some of the common questions I get when coaching people or in communication will be, how do I know the difference between my heart and my head? And it's such a really excellent question because you're thinking from the state of mind and consciousness that you're currently experiencing. So if you want to be in your heart, maybe you're really in materialism and it's just like, I really want this. And it's a material object. And that's where, for me, hypnosis really helps. And anyone listening to this, you can Google the heart journey hypnosis and I'll send it to you for free because it's the best thing that I am aware of now that puts you in another state to just look at it from from a relaxed state of mind. Right. And then when you're talking about health, once you're feeling healthy and vital, your consciousness is going to shift. You're going to have a different understanding. You're going to be more clear-minded,
Yeah.
like that's it. Because again, it's like looking through the windshield. It's like, what do I want to see? And there's just mud and stuff. You can't really see, it's like,
Yeah.
you feel terrible. You only have a little bit of light, but then boom, you're like, holy, what you can see, like, okay, what
Yeah.
do I want, And so a really important distinction. And if we want to get out of that, I think that health is such a baseline, and that baseline for many people is way down here, health and stress. Try to figure out those two things. So a really important addition. Do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, it's super interesting that you just mentioned a book regarding hypnosis and the heart, because from what it seems as though the slower brainwave patterns, when you're really sedated, it creates some sort of a synchronization between the rhythm of the heart and the brain. So that would make sense. If you're gonna go into hypnosis and you want to access a thought from a different perspective, maybe from the neurons in your heart rather than the neurons in your brain, you would have to be able to access a certain state, and you would need to have coherence. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's just, I'm excited because I feel like this information is getting out there. From my own experiences in helping others, like these changes are happening really fast now. I'm talking about people are having transformative experiences within 2-3 days, sometimes 2-3 weeks, but usually, if you stay steady, and like you said, it's all about your habits, man. It's all about what you do every day. If you do the same thing every day and it's in a negative, it's going to keep you in a negative pattern. But it's all about breaking the negative patterns, the negative habits. And I'm not saying that you can't indulge and be a regular human, but at least have something that kind of resets you, realigns you, and gets you right.
Yeah, 100%. You don't have to go full aliens with it. Hey, I'm going through David Goggins' book now, and I'm already like thinking about this. Is like just go like not even half David Goggins. Do you know his story is outrageous? Even if you went half his power, it's just ludicrous.
He's a
Like,
military guy.
yeah, you got to like do 0.1 David Goggins, and it's like 10 average human beings. It's just absolutely outrageous. But it's beautiful because that's another person that like I don't agree with all of his lifestyle, but what the thing about him is like, or want to do that is like, he's setting a whole new bar, and he like, that's what he's here to do. Like, you know what? This is what you think this is the 4-minute mile. It's actually like 2 minutes, you know what I mean? And then plus I don't know, do all this other stuff. It's just craziness, but it's showing what's possible. And so if we can kind of tap into that, and it's all in us, it's not like you see someone else and it's not like they're special. It's
Yeah.
you have that ability. It's not that like the DMT and all of that spiritual, you're more spiritual than this person. You need to wear that clothes. You need to align your chakras. You got to figure out what your past lives are. All of that information is in you. You're the boss. You know what I mean? You have this, and we can learn how to tap into it through our own intent. And that's a really important thing that you said. Man, I want to thank you for your time, because this has been a wonderful conversation, super in depth. What I want to ask, and feel free to elaborate for as long as you want. I just want to honor your time and all that kind of stuff. If there's anything that you wish that we had talked about or covered, feel free to talk about that for as long as you wish. And also, the question that I wanted to ask is just a simple protocol from your perspective to kind of just keep in alignment. Maybe it's like a daily practice or a perspective, just, something practical. People are in their worlds now. They want to make a change. I think people just want to have food and a roof over their head. They want to do something meaningful. They want to have some free time. They want to have some good relationships, but also they want to have, like, I don't know, they want to feel peaceful and they want to feel empowered. So just some support in that direction.
Yeah, well, one of the main things for me, at least noticing everything in society, is, put your ringer on the phone and put it down, put it in the next room. Because I've noticed that one of the trends that's going on is because normally people silence their cell phones, all the time, silence it 24/7. So there's some sort of neurotic checking it, right? Like, I didn't hear a ring, better look, might have missed something. So if I've just noticed that even for myself, I go through bouts of, that sort of thing, using the phone too much. And I think that it's important to put the phone down. That's one of your biggest stressors in life right now. Put the phone down for at least 3-4 hours a day and put the ringer on and put it somewhere else, because you don't need that constant stressor in your life to kind of, you build a neuroticism in your life. And I've noticed that people have kind of gotten worse with that they're constantly checking their phones, which means you're constantly distracted. You're never, present. You need to be present with yourself. Another big thing is sunlight. I think sun is, one of the most vilified thing throughout history. Based on the medical establishment, it's just silly. I think sunlight is super key. And I feel like accessing the sun at least for a few minutes a day, not with sunglasses on. I'm not talking about sun gazing, but I'm talking about at least just letting the sun hit your eyes a little bit. That's our natural state. This is what we've naturally been, here to do, is access the sun. And if there's anything that could be I guess, point to the existence of a physical God, I would think it's the sun, just because it gives life to the whole planet, and everything would die without it. I don't care what anybody says. But let me see this. Breath work is key. I say breath work in the sunlight and put the phone down. That's just my simple ones, man. But in terms of something that I want to elaborate, I want to give your listeners something to chew on. I've been kind of developing a telepathic protocol for the past 3 years. And I feel like, we're going to be presenting it in a very methodical manner. I'm actually interested in maybe doing some work with the Johns Hopkins guys on presenting this. Kind of premature though. But anyways, the way that you develop telepathic ability is by developing the ability to influence your autonomic nervous system. The easiest way to develop control of your autonomic nervous system is to get into altered states and visualize. You could do this either via a self-hypnosis on YouTube. You could do this maybe by doing 15 minutes of the Wim Hof method, which you can find on YouTube. There's different sort of meditative guided meditations that you can access for free on YouTube. What you want to do is, when you're in this deeply relaxed state, but you're still awake, you want to visualize either your right hand or your left hand getting warm or cold. There's zillions of studies showing that this is already a thing. So you don't have to question whether this is a thing, okay? That's why we're presenting it in 4 steps. Influence autonomic nervous system. What you're going to do is once you're successful with warming or cooling your hand, you're going to be able to feel it physically. And then you could actually touch it with the other extremity, the other hand, to verify that the warmth or the coldness has transpired. And if you're really crazy about it, then you can get like a little infrared thermometer and have a friend monitor you, but that takes another person. And we're talking about crazy things, so we tend to want to keep this private. So Remember, trance state, influence, temperature of the hand. And then what you're going to do is after you're able to influence temperature of the hand, might take you, some people can get it on the first shot within 20 minutes. Some people can get it within 3 days. Some people take 3 weeks. But generally speaking, 90% of the people will get it within 3 weeks. Autonomic nervous system control. They'll be able to prove to themselves that they can do it. Once you go ahead and prove to yourself that you have this ability, then guess what? The only thing you have to do is extend it 6 inches past your hand. Extend your visualization past the physical slowly, right? So what you want to do is extend your visualization from your hand out into your other hand. Some people will call it you're making an energy ball. It doesn't really matter to me. What you want to do is prove that you can influence the signaling that we believe is taking place over the nervous system. I believe that it is taking place over the nervous system, but there is a layer that extends past the nervous system, right? So extend the visualization past your hand into your other hand and see if you can feel the sensation of a tingling, electrical tingling in your other hand. And at that point, you know that your intent can extend past your body. And then for the second part, you're going to need a partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, parent, somebody who's slightly open to this, okay? Just slightly open. They don't have to be in a meditative state even. But what you want them to do is sit across from you, let's say 4 feet, just low light conditions, because you don't want too much excitation. You want to stay in a trance state. This is key. When people ask me, well, how come it didn't work, or, what happened? It's like, well, you have to stay in a trance state. I work with hypnotherapists all across the world in terms of teaching this because they know how to induce trance states. So this makes it really easy. So their biggest thing when I go through this protocol with them is like, what else is there? This is too easy. So basically what I said is you sit across from somebody 4 to 5 feet away, and you take that visualization from your hand and you visualize that extending to in the middle of their head, whether it be their third eye, the middle of their brain, whatever it is, just that general area. And what will happen is that if you made a connection, they will go into rapid eye movement. So you want them to have their eyes closed, and you'll see that their eyes start to twitch just in the slightest. And that is an indicator that you have influenced their consciousness. So basically you're in a trance state and you have induced a trance state into them. And you have induced what I believe to be a coupling. And that coupling overlays with this thing called inductive charging, which is wireless charging. And the way that wireless charging works is it's a magnetic field that basically couples with another one. And that's how the charging signaling takes place. And that's exactly what I believe is taking place to a certain extent with telepathy. So what happens is other person goes into rapid eye movement, shows you that you've made the connection. Over that visualization, whether it be an electric bolt or a white light or any colored light, doesn't matter. You go ahead and as vivid as you can, let me repeat that, as vividly as you can, you slowly take the object, let's say it's a red apple, and you put it from your mind into their mind, slowly and vividly as possible, as vivid as possible. And as long as you can maintain their rapid eye movement and you visualize that as vividly as possible, you might be surprised at the results. So that's basically the gist. It's a 4-step protocol to develop telepathic abilities. It's something that we plan to unveil this year. It's nothing new. Part of me is excited about it, but other part is I'm more interested in the health stuff. But this stuff has been, like I said, Hans Berger devised the EEG just to study this back in the 1920s. So it's not a new ability. It's just we have to reintroduce this ability to modern humanity. And I think that this might help in that manner, because at this point, when it comes to the telepathic conversation, a lot of people seem to be lost. They don't know where to start at. So does any of this make sense?
Yeah, man, 100%. That's exciting stuff. Well, when I was doing research back in the day, I read a book by Upton Sinclair called Mental Radio. And you can look at also the Men Who Stare at Goats movie. And it says at the beginning, more of this is real than you'd believe. And in my own research, everything in that movie happened. I've found research in, other than I don't know if somebody stopped a goat's heart. But all the other stuff I've heard about and read about. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, it's really interesting to try to bring science to this, because once it becomes provable, it's just like, this is a skill that can be developed. This is something that can be shared.
Exactly. And like for me, the most important thing is this. Look, communication takes place through the voice, emails, text, whatever. So telepathic communication isn't necessarily that important from a functional perspective, but from understanding the human perspective, things like reincarnation, things like consciousness, telepathy, it has to start as telepathy. You have to know that consciousness is not relegated to the brain 100% of the time. However, I do think in the stress state, absolutely, your consciousness is relegated to your neural pathways. But like I said, you get into the trance state, you get out of that panic sort of mentality, and then you can access a deeper level of consciousness that, it's been around forever, but we're just starting to understand it in modern terms. So I think that's what excites me, is validating the University of Virginia, their reincarnation studies, validating the out of body experiences that so many people have, validating spontaneous remission that Joe Dispenza is inducing in people on a regular basis. All this stuff is happening right now, and we need a catalyst to kind of push it forward in terms of acknowledging that yes, this stuff is real, because we have indeed proven that consciousness is not always relegated to the brain. That makes sense?
100%, man. I totally dig it. And I agree with that. We're scientifically pushing the boundaries. When hypnotism came out and they were using it in World War II because they ran out of morphine, that was just something that happened as a result of the environment. And then it's like, oh man, this works. What is the limit to this? And it's very important stuff, because in my research, I believe that a lot of this stuff is used in a negative manner. And I do believe that they use social conditioning, hypnosis. Like Kanye's new song, or whatever one with Little Pump, is what is the lyric? You've listened to it? It's use a effing hoe. I love it.
Yeah.
Just repeat it. Now, how hypnosis works is you repeat. That's one way to get into the subconscious mind. Just repeat it. Mm-hmm. Why is that mainstream music to millions of young people? What the flying F-bomb is happening? This is deliberate. This isn't by accident. And so when I went down, this is like, they got education, they have every institution, and it's all money and keeping us at a level of consciousness to make us believe that we are goldfish. You're not a goldfish. You are a dolphin. You have incredible abilities, and you're connected to the entire ocean, spirit, nature, force, and you can change your conditioning. You just have to have the courage to start taking different actions. So one of my suggestions is to just take more action than thinking. I don't care if it's just take one thing and just start doing actions. You're not what you think, you're what you do. So see what one action you can do this week that you haven't done last week. Even driving a new way to work counts. Doing jogging counts. Just doing breath work counts. Doing a few minutes of art counts. Just do one thing different to change your direction.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, in one of the chapters of my book, I delve into the mechanics of brainwashing, because we can brainwash ourselves in a positive manner, right? Or, if you get involved with the wrong people, you can get brainwashed in a negative manner. And that's kind of not the scary thing, but you see a lot of these things happen in society in a subtle manner, right? It's not outright like, hey, we're brainwashing you, but there are so many subtle things where it's like, hey, this is getting into my consciousness somehow. I need to turn this off. Like, I'm aware of that now. I wasn't aware of that before. And I feel bad for people that aren't aware of it, because they get sucked into it and they don't realize that's what's making them feel maybe inferior and not being the best version of themselves. Is they get caught up in the media hype and, the propaganda and, the ways to go ahead and implant thoughts into your mind that aren't even your own. So it's, basically, to tie in the whole conversation, we've been talking about how to break that programming, how to be cognizant of when somebody's trying to program you in a manner that you don't want to be, because this is the concept of free will. We do have free will, but in a lot of cases, people don't exercise it because they're not aware of the tools that are utilized outside of them to kind of program them in subtle ways. So it's an important conversation to have, and I hope people can understand that. We're trying to bring it from a positive place and just trying to help others, man.
Yeah, exactly. And if people are interested, check out the work of the documentary Century of Self about Edward Bernays, and check out the work of Darren Brown. And so part of the realization is you are being influenced in a negative capacity. It's a bit of a bummer, but when you understand how it works, there's a really great movie too. They Live. You ever see that? And it's where he puts on the glasses and they're all these skulls and whatever. But there's a scene where he looks at the billboard, and one of the conditions is work 40 hours, drink alcohol. You were not good enough. When you study hypnosis, you need to know what your underlying objective is. What do you want them to do? And what people aren't recognizing is that a lot of the stuff is masked, and then they have this seeding thing. So one example that I give is that it's not just CSI on television. It is a massive genre that's deliberate of murder shows.
Yeah.
The show is about murder. That's what most people are watching. Then you have reality TV, which is complete nonsense, and it's watching other people's lives. That's ridiculous. And so we don't have like role models. Where is Bruce Lee? Where is Jesus Christ? Where are all these role models? And in Buddhism, they call it positive mental, or just mental nutriments. They can be positive or negative. And so you keep filling your consciousness with this stuff. Your body also emotes. That's another thing that I like to make very clear, is that a terrible example, and I apologize for, actually, no, we'll do the nice example. Let's just say you got like, you're at home and one of your friends or somebody comes over with 12 kittens. And they're new, and you get to play with them, and you can kind of like feel their little soft ears, and they're coming over. And then you got 12 puppies, and you get to play with the little puppies and pet them. It feels really nice. And you can kind of feel that experience. But if I take one of those kittens, right, and I'm just do this brief, it won't be as intense, but I chop off its head, and you're like, oh my God. Now, usually when I do this example, I get the person and I say, did you have a childhood animal? And then I draw it out really slow. And they're just like, why are you doing that to me? Like, oh my God. And it's like, it's just to teach you that in order for you to make sense of what I'm saying to you, you have to experience it. You are emoting an energy. Your body is reacting to me just saying words. So what do you think is happening when you're watching all of this stuff and then you start becoming desensitized?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's really, really important to understand what you're taking in. And that's the example I like.
Absolutely, man. That's a really good example. It's brutal though. But
it's brutal. I'm trying to get the nice one, I gotta get one that's softer, but it really hits home, It's just so terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good example, and it's happening so much, and it's so subtle, man. And but it is what it is. So I think that at some point, it's all about creating a new paradigm based on what we can do to help each other. And that's what this game is about. So that's why I'm just, I'm happy to connect with you. And I just looked at your YouTube channel. I feel like I'm going to have a lot of stuff to watch over the next couple of weeks, man. So I'm excited to connect with you, Matt. And I'm just real proud of all the work you've done so far. And hopefully in the future, when we unveil the telepathy thing, you can have me back on, man.
Oh, yeah, I'd love that. And I'll just say real briefly that I actually submitted a board game to Mattel and Bradley that was a telepathy board game like 12 years ago.
Wow.
And so now and it was basically to practice telepathy, to encourage kids. And so now that I'm having the idea, if there's anybody out there that can help me make this come to fruition, I still have the plans. I was like, man, I should just put that out there, because the idea is to teach it to kids, make it super fun. And the protocol is super simple, but it's to say, hey, you influence. And I would do this as a teenager. And like, there were several times where like, I would guess the card correct, and it blew my mind. I was like, holy crap. But sometimes it would be like a 9. It'd be 9 of hearts. I'd get 9 of spades. But then I'd get my friends to do it. And then we would just try. It's like, who cares if you get it wrong? We try for it. They would get it at like number 6. It's a 1 in 52 chance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it just shows like, oh crap. Like, do we have this ability? And so that's what it's saying, is like, we are greater than we imagine. It's not, it's like, kind of you touched the nail on the head. It's more about health and empowerment, but it's also to say, hey, this is how powerful you are. You do have access to this. So this lower level stuff shouldn't apply.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing too about a board game like that is that you can't really access these abilities without being connected with oneself to a certain extent. So you're almost kind of like forcing somebody or tricking somebody into reconnecting with the self in a way that they're going to see benefits, and they're not even going to realize why those things, those benefits, why they feel happier, why they feel more content in the days and weeks after they keep playing the game, So I think that's just like there's, programming from the negative side. There's also little things that we could do to help from the positive side to help people reconnect with themselves without, being so stringent about it, like creating a game, like you said, it would be a great idea.
100%, man. Well, I appreciate you and your work for coming on. Thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate that. And where can people find more about you, and any closing statements before anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, man. So questions for the Lion Tamer 1 and 2 right there. You could find it on Amazon. The website is the letter Q, the number 4, LT.com. Questions for the Lion Tamer. .com. Actually, most if not all my chapters in my books are on the blog for free, because I'm all about easy access to information. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, you could check it out. You don't have to pay for it. You could email me at q4lt00@gmail.com if you have any questions, or if you have any feedback in regards to the telepathy training. Just let me know. I'm always open to go ahead and discuss anything with you guys. So that's pretty much it, man. I'm excited to have been on your show, and I look forward to digging through your whole YouTube channel now.
Awesome, man. Well, it's a privilege to be connected. Thank you so much for your work and coming on and sharing, man.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
See you later. Thanks, guys, for watching. Peace.
Peace.